Welcome to Backstage with Becca B, with special guest, Chibueze Ihuoma. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca B. On this episode, he studied at NYU Tisch, has performed in regional productions of shows such as Once and Tick Tick Boom, and is currently on the national tour of Hadestown, where he is part of the Workers' Chorus and understudies Orpheus. Please welcome Chibueze Ihuoma.
Hiya, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing pretty good. It's a nice overcast but bright day here in Chicago.
Yes.
So that's very nice.
Y'all are in Chicago. Have you all been anywhere warm in the past 6 months?
Yeah, surprisingly, yes. Last week we was in Durham.
Oh,
Durham,
and
North Carolina. It was warm. I mean, it was still winter, so it wasn't super fun, going to the lake or the beach or whatever and something like that. But it definitely was nice to have 60-degree days as opposed to the past weeks of 20 and such like that. Unfortunately, we will be in the cold for some time, but
I know that in Dallas, you all kind of had a weird weather because it was
bizarre.
70 one day and then 20 the next day, and that's Texas for you all.
It confused us. I mean, it also confused the local Texans. So we were all in it together. They were like, hey, we're not used to it being as cold as it is. And we were like,
it confuses me constantly. And it's 70 degrees this week, and it's supposed to be 30 next week here.
Wow.
I'm in Dallas.
Right.
So
gotcha.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, they're getting the Texas welcome while they're here. Well, I am so excited that we could plan this.
Yeah, me too.
I've heard great things about your performance as Orpheus, but I want to talk about your whole theater career.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to start off with, when did you know that you wanted to be a theater performer?
Okay, so I had theater came to me not super late in life or anything, but not as early as I was in my little pre-K production of The Wizard of Oz or something like that. I got into it more in middle school. And that's because at first I was big music head. I was in the choir. I fiddled, actually, ironically enough, on fiddle violin a lot in orchestra for a hot second. And then I stopped doing that because I thought soccer was the way. As life can tell, that it wasn't. But we take our paths as we do. But it was middle school when I started doing drama because they were big on musicals. And I was like, oh, that's fun. I like to sing, and there's a story with it too. And then it wasn't until high school, maybe sophomore year, I did a summer program at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. They have a young artist summer intensive type thing. And I was like, oh yeah, let me apply to it and stuff like that. And it was the first time I was both surrounded by people that were as passionate about theater and performing as I was. We're all extremely talented. So I was just being inspired left and right by people who were just doing amazing things I couldn't even fathom. And then the thing that really did the click for me was actually the fact that a lot of the teachers at the program were performing artists. And they were oh yeah, well, I'm doing this intensive, but later this year I'm going to be in this production touring, or I'm going to be I'm the lead choreographer for this dance company, so that's my main thing. And I was just oh, people do it as jobs. It's a true thing. And then from then on, I kept trying to do those types of intensives and things. And I did one that was college oriented at NYU. For high schoolers. And then that was the moment where I was oh, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do for college. This is it. And then so that was my entry into it. But definitely music first, and then through the music came in everything else, just seeing people kill monologues or kick their faces and stuff. And I was just oh, okay. Maybe
I gotta do this.
Mm-hmm.
And for those watching, I have to point out the bio on your website, because on your, like, when you read the About Me section on your website, you can tell how passionate you are about musical theater. And I feel like it's like one of the most passionately typed out bios on any website I've read. I was like,
thank you.
He loves to do this.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it truly was, it means a lot to me to perform. I think like the first time I ever like did like large scale performance, because like the thing about choir is that you're with a bunch of other people. So like whatever effect you have on the audience, you kind of chalk it up to like, oh, you know, we're all just like, they're happy to see their kids singing and stuff like that. But it was actually, I remember in one of like the choir things, they like were like doing like solos and stuff like that, and I was like very shy as a child, so I was really not trying to like, I was like, okay, how do I do the solo? And then the teacher was like, well, you have to sing in front of everybody in class, and I was like, oh no. But then I did that, and then it was the reactions of people, and specifically like just the fact that it made people either like happy or more lively or put smiles on their faces and that type of thing, even from people that like would like not like I had like any like actual like bullies, at least in high school. I was lucky in that regard, but like just people that would like joke around and mess around with me, all of a sudden we're like, hey, okay, and then like we're having like a fun time, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then when I did it for like the concert, it was really like exciting just to feel the energy of the people in the audience. And then as time has gone on, both from simply the stories or like the performances I get to put on it impacting people, or the fact of things like representation and that they've been able to see themselves through me portraying characters or doing the so and so, the fact that I've seen it like really affect them emotionally, that really struck a chord. And if someone like ever like caught me and was like on like a casual moment, like, hey, like that show you did, like I really loved that the like your performance, and it really meant a lot to me. And it was like, wow, that's what I want to do. And like a big part of the bio too is that like my parents initially definitely were more of like, hey, like let's get that doctor trained, baby, you know. We did a thing.
Nope.
Well, no. But like, I found my little caveat.
I want to go a different direction.
No, absolutely. But it's in some interesting ways, it's the same direction. I mean, don't come to me for medical advice about like that skin rashes that's on your shoulder or something. But at the same time, like, especially something I noticed, like, you know, over the pandemic, all the things I was turning to for emotional support and for like to keep me going through lots of these days were different TV shows or different albums or like even like, you know, different video games and stuff like that. Like all these things that have a lot of artistry to them are the things that kept me sane. So in some ways, like it is like a genuine medicine for the spirit and for the soul. I didn't get a PhD in it, but alas, hopefully it could help in some ways, you know.
You got the equivalent to a PhD in like in a way, kind of.
Fair, yeah. Fair. Yeah.
So, I mean, and I totally get what you mean. I was like, it's ridiculous, but like right before the pandemic started, I started watching Nancy Drew on the CW, and it helped me get through like the whole pandemic. And then like plus of course Broadway music. But I like feel ridiculous going, oh yeah, like watching a TV show, like a supernatural TV show was like a bright point of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And it's often, it doesn't even have to be like the most like super like highbrow thing either.
Yes.
Like me and my girlfriend, we were watching the reboot of like the Winx saga on Netflix, and like objectively you know, it's quality, you know, it's debatable. Let's leave it at that. It is debatable. But we had a blast because it was just like, this is just making us laugh a lot. And I'm like still invested, and like I still feel like that engagement.
Yes.
And you know,
art is wonderful. So growing up, how did you work on becoming a well-rounded performer? Because I also saw dance on your resume.
True. I mean, there was a lot. Okay, so funnily enough, actually, one of the first things I did do as a kid, because my parents were like just trying to get me and my siblings into pretty much any and all extracurricular that ever existed. At one point, I tried to do a form of martial arts with my brother, which was always goofy though, because we would always walk home just in our uniforms, which was really, that's a whole side thing. But the way I got into dance was actually because one of the local things was just like your typical like dance center a la Dance Moms type situation. And then like absolutely. And then that's where I started. And I was like, you know, I was young. So I was like a 7-year-old, like tap dancing and doing like acro. And I wasn't super good at anything. But that was my first intro to dance. And then, like I said, soccer took me away from it. And then I spent 5 years trying to be good at something that I was never going to be good at. But then when I got back to high school, there was a, instead of like, you're required to do a sport of some kind. And then one of them was like dance classes. Ooh. And then if you got like,
nice,
there was like a base level that was just like, oh, do some plies and like releves and Pilates, and that was your dance class. But then if you expressed like, hey, I do really want to like get better, then all of a sudden there was like different levels of like, oh, okay, now like you're in like a proper ballet class and this and that. So then, or like a modern dance class. Yeah. So then from there, or from like at school, they were like super, anyways, in college, they were super into like making sure everyone had a certain foundation of vocabulary and of technique in multiple disciplines. So that even if you were like, hey, I'm not going to be a dancer, I know enough. Like, for instance, for me, tap is the one where I'm like, don't put me in the call, please. But if like I was at a show and there was a simple tap combination, I can go home and I know my flaps and my shuffles and like all that type of stuff. And then I can piece my way through it.
Ooh, and you mentioned acro earlier. I caught that. Do you do acro too?
Oh, well, for whatever reason, again, I was a much bendier child it was. And it was right. Yeah. But right before things were going to get like spicy and like with the flips, that's when I stopped. But then in college, actually, we had an acro class that like for like a couple, like 2 semesters, I think. And then it was the tragedy of my college career is that we were just like getting to like learn like front handsprings and stuff like that. And people were like getting really excited. Like I had like landed like 2 with like some light assistance from the teacher on the flip, but I was getting really hyped. And then bang, everybody went home. And it was all we could learn was just headstands from the comforts of our room.
Oh no!
Yeah.
So you're like, maybe in the future.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now that things open back up, the teacher that we had works at Chelsea Piers, like a studio in New York. So I'm gonna find him. I'm gonna find him.
There's also adult gymnastics classes. I'm in one right now. So.
Oh, coolio! Wow.
And it's not just like a girls thing. It's like like sometimes more guys than girls join, and you can
absolutely
anywhere.
No, I believe that. One of my close friends who also does theater, he's a really, really big gymnastics head, and like every like Monday he goes just to like the gymnastics gym is just there for hours.
Yes, it's fun. You challenge yourself.
Absolutely.
And so you
really cool about.
Yes. So you talked about NYU earlier, and you ended up going to NYU to study in theater. NYU, how do you say it?
Yeah, NYU Tisch.
Yes, NYU Tisch. Okay. It sounds like it make the pronunciation, I'm like, it can't be that easy to say.
You know, you know,
like
it's real hard. I understand. I absolutely understand.
It can't be that easy to say. So why did you choose to go there, and what was the most valuable takeaway you learned?
Okay, so a couple reasons why I chose to go there. One, because I just fell in love. When I did that program that I talked about, I fell in love with the city immediately. I mean, I already had like a kind of like fantasy about like studying in NYU. I don't know if you watched the show Glee, but like there was like the moment where like Rachel Berry goes to like the fake Juilliard, like NIADA or something like that. And then like she's studying something. I was like, yeah, that'd be kind of sick, low key. And then so like once I did the program and I was studying and I was just like walking to Washington Square or hopping on the subway to like go up to Central Park and this and that, as well as like, you know, taking classes, it just felt right. And it was, so that was like a really, really big one. And then specifically the program that I was in, not only were there like a lot of because there are like lots of different acting studios that they have within Tisch, and then they kind of like place you based on like your audition and like based on like an interview that they do with you, like, oh, maybe they'll be better starting off with Meisner's version, or with Stella Adler, or with Strasberg, that type of thing. Yeah. And there was only one that was dedicated to music theater. And what I really appreciated about that program is that it was a lot of, probably I'd say maybe one of the few programs I know of in the country where it was actually predominantly people of color that were the teachers, and then the head of the program was a queer black man, and I was like, that's wild. Like that you won't find that in, so even within NYU, not the other programs were like in terms of their teaching, of course, like still like same level, but like even within there, that was like a unique thing. So that in my head, I was like, okay, and all the teachers were like working actors that would often, in some ways better and for worse sometimes, would go off and be like, hey, by the way, I'm gonna direct this show in Chicago, so you're gonna have a sub for like 3 months. But literally, or like there was my favorite one was we had like sight singing teacher, and she loved teaching. She loved all of us. Her name was Crystal Monet Hall. And then one day she was like, hey, so actually I'm gonna be with the Kesha tour as one of her backup singers, so I'm gonna have to go. And we were all like, what? And then I think Kesha like performed at the Grammys or something like that. And we were all watching from home. And then there was just her in the background. Like last week. So I was like, oh yeah, there you go. There's Crystal. It was so funny. But that was a really cool notion to me, because I was like, oh, you guys are all working actors currently. So like the idea is that lots of the curriculum would be based on what they were seeing in the field and what they were expecting of performers they were trying to hire. So that mixed with like the diversity that they had, mixed with me loving the city, I was like, you know what, this is the one.
And it's good that they were working actors too, because then you get the experience, you get like the lesson from working actors instead of people that maybe are like, instead of like, I mean, people who have that past experience and are teaching are still amazing, but you also get like the updated, like new ways of learning from teachers.
And it was interesting too, because there was a range of like the younger teacher that maybe taught like a mask class or like a physical acting type class, and they were very much like maybe 10 years older than us, so their lived current experience as an actor, it would be very similar to like ours, like once we graduated. And then there were also the teachers that have been doing productions and like done shows for like years and years and years. So they had that past experience, but then also found themselves in places where they needed to also adapt to how the industry was changing, and they needed to like still be cognizant of what was going on, or else like, you know, be left behind or something like that.
Yes, and it changes quick, as we've learned over the past, especially like 2 or 3 years. I mean, with Truly. Like, I'm sure that you've had a lot more like virtual auditions than in person and stuff, which is something to adapt to.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely a real challenge, because you learn all these different techniques and styles and like ways of both presenting yourself and of like how, like whether big you're acting or like how focused it is, like based on the room and based on being in these like larger like studios where like the class is sitting on one side and then you're standing and singing your song. And then all of a sudden you do the exact same thing on camera and it does not read the same way. And like, even like things like with volume, like in some ways you might be like, oh yeah, I'm like filling up this room, and like they're like feeling like they're being shaken in their seats, like when I built this high note, and then you do it on your phone and then it just goes like, and it's like, yikes, okay, right. That's not gonna work now.
And you and then you figure out like if your phone is like working, if the audio on your phone's working, like technology problems, all the technology problems you have to deal with. You're like, oh, maybe I should take this to the shop and get my audio fixed.
Yeah, or like a camera thing. Like that was actually a big one for me, because I struggled with the concept of like having good alignment. So lots of times I would like do a tape or something like that for like a class, because once we switched to virtual, like then we had to like do all of our stuff in that way. And then lots of my tapes, like I'd be kind of like this, and then like the camera would be like looking up at me and I'd be like, oh, and then they're like, they're like, you need to fix this, please. And so then like it makes
they're like, get something to hold the phone so it's like level.
Yes. And it was true. It was an interesting thing also. Like we had interesting conversations, as well as sometimes just realizing realities of, oh, you have to like invest in yourself, and like you have to save up for things that are going to enhance your audition experience and chances. And as it sucks sometimes, because it's like, man, I don't want to spend like $150 on a ring light. Maybe that might be a high estimate, but like a bunch of money on a ring light and like stand and collapsible thing, and then like, oh, I have to buy a background too, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the day, it's like, well, hey, some people might be lucky, and like, for instance, right now I'm lucky that like happen to be in a hotel room where like the window in front of me is just massive, and so the light's coming in, and like there happens to be a wall here. But in lots of other circumstances, especially when you find in your New York apartments, that was the real struggle, because we all had like, you know, really decked out rooms and this and that, but then like having a blank wall was impossible to do a tape in front of. So it was like you have to spend the money on getting like the backdrop, or you have to spend the money on getting the stand to do this and that, and then you know, hurts the pocket, hurts the wallet. But when you see the type of tapes that come out, you'll do the same exact amount of like work, but it will like look, the finished product will be so much greater. And that was something that took a lot of like of learning and like trial and error to get right for me.
I mean, and you're like, I'm not exactly going to school for film TV, so like learning film and TV at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
So, hey, you're getting like you're learning the behind the scenes too.
Absolutely. I mean, it was cool too, because I feel as though like my last few years of school, they did a slight focus on film and TV, which again got exacerbated when we were all like remote. But it was cool to learn those like styles of acting, and like learn like, oh, okay, how am I just gonna act like with just my eyes and like my facial movements in this moment, and then not need to do any type of gesturing or like full body acting. And it was a really useful muscle to work and have. And for me, like when, I was like binge watching Wink Saga or like whatever other like, shows and stuff like that, it was interesting because it was like, oh, these shows, despite the pandemic, and of course they have to like make alterations, those are still happening. So like having a good foundation and like the ability to go back and forth between the two ended up being something that was more pertinent in my mind, because I was like, if something happens to theater and so, let me be able to have the skills to do a TV show and then still support myself, as opposed to only feeling like I can just do theater and that's like all that I'm able to do.
I mean, and theater actors or actresses are so talented. Like, y'all can do everything. So don't limit your, like, I feel like no one is truly limited in theater to just theater. A lot of people go the TV and film route eventually.
Absolutely. And I think it's like the coolest careers to me are the ones where people are kind of dancing back and forth between the two. Yes. Like you'll see Hugh Jackman play Curly and then he'll go play Wolverine for like years and years. And then he'll come back and now he's doing Music Man, or like he'll do Don Valjean. And it's like, oh yeah, like that's pretty awesome.
And I was going to say Adrienne Warren out there killing it right now too. Yeah. I saw her in Tina a couple months ago. So she's also doing TV film, I think, right now. So before I get into Hadestown, I want to talk about shows you've done like regionally or at school. You've done once in Tick Tick Boom regionally, I saw, and Tick Tick Boom is one of my favorites. Yeah. What's been your personal favorite show to be in and why?
Okay, personal favorite to be in. I have two strong contenders, and I have one of my New Year's resolution was to be a more decisive person. So at least I'll start with one, and then if it ends up elaborating to the second, I'll go with that. But I think my favorite experience to be in was actually the Wild Party, in which we did at NYU, and I played Mr. Black. And what I really loved about that production, one, it was very aesthetically, like our director and choreographer, like he really was doing the thing, and everyone was looking fierce, everyone was singing down. It was great. But what also for me personally was so exciting was that the character I was playing was very different to how I perceived myself, which was interesting because as I was talking to my director, his name is Del Howlett, and I was talking to Del, and he was like, the thing is that that's how a lot of us see you. And I was like, wait, what? Like, it's either as like a more suavish, like composed, intelligent, debonair person, and I'm thinking I'm just some derp that like that's also like a nerd, So then playing that character, and then both like, and I maybe utilize a lot of assets and facets of myself that I don't normally think of. Like, he was a character that could be very still, but very laser focused and direct, and can impact an entire room to like turn their heads just by walking in and like having his air. And then also what was interesting is that in the score, he's actually more of like a baritone role versus like lots of the other characters. So it was really interesting to go into the lower registers and find the power and like the sometimes sultriness, sometimes smoothness, excitement of those lower tones, and it made me realize like, oh, this is just as valuable as singing high and all that. And then also it was very rewarding to like do a show and feel confident that I'm never going to lose my voice because it was like, oh, like I'm not shrieking or anything. So it was like, and it was really exciting, because there would be some riffs that I would do, and then like I would think of it like normally, like as prior to doing the show, I would think of it like, oh, this is just like a normal, simple thing. But then like the audience reaction to it would be like, whoa, and I'd be like, that's so interesting. Yeah. And I loved like the stories that were being told. It was with like a bunch of my friends, so we all had like a grand time. it was, yeah, that was a really special one. So I say that was my favorite. That was definitely my favorite within school. I can tell you that. And then favorite outside of school, I think was Once, because it was, yeah, it was really just so beautiful. I mean, the person who played our guy and our girl, actually the person playing girl, Julie Nicole, she is one of the standbys on Fanny Bryce. I mean, so like that was a fun thing, just be able to work with her and then be like, oh, I see you. Yes! Absolutely. So yeah, but she and Heath, they were just such a dynamic duo. So watching them was wonderful. Doing like a Czech accent was a very fun time because I played Andrej. And then it was definitely the first show where I had to play guitar and like become the band of, of this piece. And all of the people were so lovely. It was the first show post-pandemic. So I feel like everybody had that like excitement glow of like, we're back, we're doing theater again. And with such a show that was like about the power of music to bring someone who was at the lowest point of their life back to life, essentially, and like to revitalize the love and like the capacity for love and like the artistic spirit inside that person was it was just so wonderful. And like I said, the cast was awesome. People were it was another show where I was like, everybody here is infinitely more talented than I am, and I absolutely love it, because like people were playing mandolin. There was this one girl, Nicole D'Angelo, she literally like said, oh, I know how to play everything except guitar. And I was like, oh, okay. And then like I didn't fully fathom it until she pulled out the clarinet and then picked up the bass and then played something on the piano. And I was like, oh, like you really play everything and like masterfully. And that's so cool. Yeah.
That's goals, to be able to like be like so fluent in like musical instruments that you can almost play everything.
Literally, like that, it was so cool. It was so cool. And yeah, just being in that kind of space and then making the music with them. And then it was cool because that was like, that was the first time I really saw myself as a musician. I had written songs before and just like that. But it was interesting when I would like say make some alternate choices or add flares on top of certain songs we were playing. And then to feel that validated by people who I definitely saw as musicians, be like, hey, yeah, that was sick. Like, play that riff again. Or like, yeah, keep doing that. Or this thing. I was like, it really, really holds a real special place in my heart, that production.
Yes. And the one thing I hear about regional shows, and I mean, it sounds like college shows too, is that there's such a sense of like community with the people you're working with. And
absolutely.
I mean, especially as you do like more and more regional shows or college shows, it's like the friendship there is on a different level. Which, speaking of that, I want to get into Hadestown because I mean, you're with these people every day. So speaking of friendship, and you're traveling with people around the world, what was your audition process like for Hadestown, and what did you know about Hadestown pre-auditioning?
Yeah, so pre-auditioning, I heard about the musical like a little bit earlier. I'll give you the full because there's a long journey of my relationship with Hadestown. So I'd first heard about it from like a friend, like offhandedly saying like, yo, I listened to this like folk opera type musical, and it was like great. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, what's it called? He's like, Hadestown. I was like, okay, cool. So then I first listened to the off-Broadway, like, was it 2018, 2017 cast album that they had, and I like listened to it and I was like, oh, this is like really cool, this is really nice. And like that was like, as like typical theater people, you attach to like an album for a bit, you listen to it every day over and over type of thing. So I was playing that heavy, just all like beats and stuff like that. And then I found out like, oh, it's coming to Broadway. This is really cool, really, really cool. And then like I was like a super like big proponent of the show. Like I was just like, yes, give it all the Tonys. I want to see this happen. I want all the good things for all these people, please. And then, so that was super cool. And then it didn't dawn on me until one day I was listening to Epic too, because I always like listened to like the Broadway and the off-Broadway one back and forth. And I was listening to Epic too. And then I was like, could I do that? And then, like that was like a thought in my head. It was bizarre to me that I hadn't thought like, oh, I could be in this show until that moment. But then I just started singing along with it. And then I was like, ooh, this is really fun too. A fun theme with me, you might find, is that I love doing shows where my vocal health will never be in jeopardy to do it. So on the flip side of something like Mr. Black, where I was like, oh, he's like in this like lower register, but like there's lots of interesting things to find here. With Orpheus, he was like in such a high register, but it was like so much of it was falsetto. And like I guess just from the music that I listened to had a developed falsetto. So then like as I was singing along with it, I was like, oh, this like sounds beautiful, but it's not hard. But and maybe like that's like that was just like the way I was intellectualizing it. But like it just felt easy to sing it, and like it felt good on my chords, and it felt right. Like one of those things where it was almost like a lock and key type of thing. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I partially picked up guitar to try to learn that song. I also picked up guitar because in school, they tried to teach us piano, but like my hands were vehemently against it and just could not pick it up.
No.
Literally. They were like, this is not what we're doing. This is not. So then like I could pick guitar, and then I was like, like playing like classics and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like let me try to learn this song. And then singing along with that and playing another like watershed moment of like, oh, something just clicked for me. So then like once I found out they announced the tour, I was like, okay, I really want to be in this, like please. At that point I had an agent, and then they got me an appointment to go on to audition for Orpheus. And like it was one of those things where I was so nervous about the audition, more so than other ones, because with other auditions, it was like, oh, well, like I'm just trying to like get this role, and like if it does, it doesn't. If it does, it doesn't. But with this one, it very much felt like, okay, was that feeling, that click that I had earlier learning this, was that real or is it fake? And that was before I fully understood the idea that like you could be right for something but still like not get a callback or not get this or that. So like now if I were to audition for the Hadestown for like the first time, it might be a different moment, but it very much was like a big deal for me when I first auditioned, because I was like, okay, if I audition and I don't get a callback, then it must have been fake, or like it must have been like maybe I got to change course or something. But then I eventually got the callback for it, and then I was going into like the different rounds and stuff like that. And I at one point got to like work with Rachel and Liam, the music director, like in the callback room. And then it was also a really fun, cute thing is that one of the people, because like during the auditions, they had us like work like with other actors for like chemistry reads and stuff like that. And then one of the Eurydices I read with is worker one, Sydney Potter, on our tour. Yeah. So then when I first saw the casting thing, I was like, hey, it's you. And she was like, hey, it's you. Yeah. So, but like, that was super cute. But then they ended up going with Nick, which like, Nick's fucking amazing. So I had no qualms. But then they were like, hey, but like, we really like you for this, like this show. Yeah. And like, even for the, like the roles, so, like, can you like come in again for like a worker track and like, the worker like Orpheus understudy? And then pandemic hit. That was like literally like on like days before. Like that was like days before like everything like shut down. But then like a year passes by, they hit me back up and they're like, hey, are you still interested? Like we would love to see you for like, this track. And I was like, hell yeah. So then I was doing different Zoom auditions and stuff like that. one of which was particularly crazy because I was on vacation in Cape Cod, like not prepared to do an audition at all. And then I sent in like a dance tape earlier that week, and they're like, hey, like tomorrow, can you do like in this audition? And I was like scrambling to find a guitar and to find this and that. But then like that was after that one, they sent me my offer and I got to be part of the show.
So it probably felt like it was like 10 years between the pandemic and like, I mean, I don't know, you were probably like, oh my God, when is this ending? Like this pandemic and the shutdown.
Truly. I mean, like it definitely felt long. It definitely felt sad, like in like the days after, like when they were like, hey, like we're gonna, like we'll come back and like have you like do this other audition, and then the audition just never came because of the circumstances of the world. But the thing was that it came like, the show started up so fast after like things started to open up. Like they were like really like ready, like, all right, like hit the gas, like we're getting these auditions done and like we're coming back. So like the moment I graduated, and it was like impeccable timing because I just graduated, and then like a couple weeks later they're like, hey, like we're here, like you want to like come back in? And I was like, okay, yeah, let's go. let's figure it out. So the wait was long, but the speed once the wait was over was blisteringly fast in a really cool way.
And the timing sounds just perfect. It's like some things happen for there's silver linings to things happening. Like you got to finish school and then go and like fully immerse yourself in what you love professionally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because I was nervous at first, like to potentially leave school to do the show, and there was like lots of back and forth in my head of whether that was the right choice. And I guess the universe was like, all right, we know you're indecisive, so let's give you a break and push it off to later when you don't have to worry about it.
So you don't have to stress yourself out too much over the decisions, because decisions are hard.
Yes.
I mean, I overthink constantly, so
it's hard not to.
It is. It's really hard not to. So what was the rehearsal process like for tour? Because you all got to rehearse together at once, which I don't know. It doesn't happen much unless you're joining a cast at the same time as everyone else and the cast is joining. Mm-hmm. Like once the tour started, they bring in new people at different times. So how did the rehearsal process help with the bond of the cast?
Oh, it was so instrumental to like the bond that we ended up making, because you're right, like even now we're seeing like people like are popping in and popping out, so that like they kind of like learn their track on their own and then like get fitted in with everyone once like they learn stuff. But when we first started, it felt like Rachel and Cody, our music director for the tour, like they really went into this with the air that like it was almost like a new production of the show, based because like like with tour, like they couldn't have like the full elevator situation and they couldn't have like all the turntables. So it really, for Rachel, it was definitely a moment, and David and KR, like our choreography team, it was definitely a moment for all of them to be like, okay, we have to like do some rethinking. And then since we're already doing the rethinking, we have a completely new cast of people that are just not like, they are not one-to-one, because sometimes like it used to be was that like the tour would try to like emulate the Broadway, and so like when they went on tour, people felt like they were getting that. But this, like they were like, nah, like let's just have people who could also play these roles, and like it just felt so special to like get this different blocking, or get this like different notes and stuff like that from Rachel and from David and Katie Rose about our characters. And it felt like we were like picking up from the ground up and starting like anew, as opposed to being like, hey, this is what Reeve does, or this is what Andrej does, or this is what Amber does, so this is what you're gonna do, or type of thing. And then I think that alone made people's hearts really open, because they really gave themselves fully to the work. And it all of us like rehearsing together. It was so cool because we're all again happy to be back post-pandemic. We're all dancing around with each other, like having like funny mishaps and bloopers within the process. And then like there were lots of memories once we've now that we've started, that we've been able to make that like are either like really emotional moments of like, oh, this was like this like moment where we were all banded together and had each other's backs and it felt like we were all really taken care of. Or conversely, hey Chibueze, I'd be like, hey Chibueze, remember that time we had to cross to the other wagon and you completely like tripped and then like fully belly flopped onto the platform and got back up? Oh yeah, we had tons of hilarious bloopers, especially among the worker ensemble. We got a lot of real fun bloopers. Yeah, but then that also was like a really big part of what made the camaraderie grow among us. And then like, you know,
each other.
Yeah, because we need to like have some laughs, have some good times, have to like supportive moments. Those were the things I think that really emphasized the bond of the group.
Yeah, and you can see it when you watch the show on tour. I've seen it both on Broadway and tour, and I love how like everyone makes the role, like from the workers chorus to Morgan making Eurydice her own, or to I saw both Hermes. I loved how Levi and Will both made it their own, and it was just like, it's different than the Broadway version. It's the same show, but it's different because everyone makes the roles their own.
Yeah, it's so cool in that way. And like I love to think that, from then on, in addition to that, those productions themselves can evolve. Like, because inevitably 2 years from now is not going to be the exact same cast either on Broadway or on tour. And I like to think that the story will keep growing, keep evolving, keep morphing when they add new people into these different roles, and it takes on like certain songs or certain connections take on different airs and have different energies between them. And that's something that I think would be really cool. And I got the feeling that's going to go in that direction.
For sure. And that's the best thing about live theater is that shows are never the same. You can see a show like tonight and then see it again tomorrow, and it's not going to be exactly the same at all, even if it's the same show. So you have actually made your Orpheus debut.
I have, yes.
And I forgot who posted videos of you singing pre-show, like doing sound check. I think it might have been Will.
Yeah. Yes, it was Will. Yeah.
Oh my God. For anyone who hasn't seen, your voice is stunning.
Thank you.
I'm hoping to make a road trip to like Austin or Houston in August, and hoping that I'll see you on as Orpheus maybe once.
Hey, hope so. Time will tell.
Yes. How do you make the character of Orpheus your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think what ends up happening, at least for me specifically with it, is, we got like as we had like a kind of understudy initial rehearsal with Rachel, and like we kind of talked about what the core aspects of each of the characters were. So then for Orpheus, there was like, this core aspect of he's this really earnest guy. He loves fully and wholly and like without restraint, like it is not like, he is not like a person that's like super self-aware of himself, in that like he's gonna like think about like a decision, like he's unlike me, he's not gonna think about his decision. He's just gonna be like, my heart tells me to do this, and so I'm going to do this. Or like my heart feels like for instance, when it comes to like something, like if it's true, he sees like what happens with the workers, he's like, my heart tells me that this is messed up and this is wrong and this needs to be changed, and so he just leads fully with that, as opposed to thinking, is it my place at first? And that's like that's kind of the arc of with him, is that, you know, come by the end of the show, all of a sudden he is thinking and overthinking, and then that ends up bringing the tragedy. But so like having those core tenets of Orpheus, of like this unassuming but also extremely kind, extremely caring and naive kid, and like awkward in the body and type of thing. Those were the main things. I was like, okay, so whatever my Orpheus becomes, these things still must be true. And then on top of that, it was just a lot of things coming up from the text. You know, Aeneas wrote these wonderfully densely detailed lyrics for everyone, with like wordplay here and like interesting like musical motifs that like keep recurring. And I think what ends up happening for me, and I think for all of the different people that like are assuming these different tracks and different characters, is that based on your own past experiences, as me, as Chibueze, and like all the life experiences that I've had, all the relationships I've had, those things, it has, because of that, when I read Aeneas's lyrics and when I hear her music, it hits me in a specific way. You know, it hits it, and like I might read a verse or I might see a song and I might think, oh, this is where he is, and like I think of that because of what I've been through, versus say what Nick might think or what Nathan might think. Or so when I learned the role, I just kind of like followed a lot of my own impulses, and then I would always check back and see, oops, when my headphones had his just decided to go on a little stroll. We're fine with just one, but this is the blooper time.
Blooper reel.
But I'll just follow my own impulses through that, and then occasionally I'll go back and check like, hey, does this impulse I have go with or against the guide tenets that we established of Orpheus and like where he is in this story. And if it was like, if I could find a way to justify being with it, then I ran with it until like either Cody or Rachel or KR were like, yes, like that's great, keep doing it, or actually, you know, because it's a collaboration. You're building the character with like these directors who have like a vision of the show, so they'll always lead you back in one way or the other direction, like nudge you back this way or that way, if like you start going on certain impulses and they think, oh, this doesn't feel right, so like let's like come back here. But if they see like the thing is that I think most actors will always encourage people to fully follow whatever impulse they have, because then you might do something that they were like, wait, I never would have thought about this because I'm not you. But like, I love it, so please keep doing it. And then I think everyone has like their own individual moments within our cast where it's just like, oh, this is a decision that is fully from them as a person. And it's supported by the character. And that's the cool thing. Like different choices can be supported by the text because it's so dense, because there's so many double entendres and multiple meanings.
Yeah, it's such a three-dimensional story.
Mm-hmm.
It's so deep.
Absolutely.
If you could give us any advice, what would it be?
Oh, just any advice?
Any advice.
Okay. Okay, one thing of advice that I could give is that, especially when it comes to like the music side of things, I guess. But one is like I was saying before, like definitely trust your impulses, because it can just end up birthing like really unique to you and really like wonderful characters and that's like the way that in terms of like auditioning or in terms of like being in shows, where someone will be like, oh, this is like a really unique performance, or this is like a really unique take on the character. And that's why I want to call you back, or that's why I want to put cast you in this, or that's why I happen to love your show. That only comes from when you trust yourself, and when you say, like, you allow yourself to be vulnerable and make a choice that might be horrible and that might, or not horrible, but make a choice that just like might be so wrong, but like you believed it could have been right, and then you went with it. And then every time, 10 times out of 10, a director will see that, or a casting director or whoever will see that and be like, I respect the fact that you were bold enough and comfortable enough with me to make that choice in front of me. And then that you were gracious enough in my reaction to it, that like, you didn't like I say, oh, this isn't right. You didn't like turn around and you're like, well, actually, I think it is. And it's just like, you know, like, that's what, like, for you to be like, oh, okay, I understand. And then like take the note. Those two things are like the things that every collaborative artistic person in the field wants to see, wants to hear, because that's like what ends up exciting them. And especially when it comes to like new pieces, that's just what they absolutely want, because sometimes they have a general idea of what the character is going to be, but then like they hire a certain actor, and then that actor they flesh out new like idiosyncrasies of a person, and it's like, oh yeah, that's amazing, I want that. Like, that's now that's part of the person, you know. So that on the acting side, that's the big thing that of advice I could give. And
I mean, yes, because Orpheus doesn't really listen. Like, he's like, I'm confident that this is gonna work.
Yes,
and he's like, I'm not listening to Hermes. It's okay. Like, I'm gonna go with my gut and go with what I think it's gonna work at all times, kind of throughout the show.
And it's cool because like in some moments that, you know, that works out for Orpheus. Like, you know, he's like, I love Eurydice, and Hermes is like, okay, but like, can't play it cool, and he doesn't do that, but like they still end up falling in love. But then on the other side, it's like Hermes is like, hey, look up, like, I know you're writing this song, but like you have to still pay attention to what's happening in the world. And he's like, no, the song, and then Eurydice is gone. And so those two, it's really exciting how that same kind of mentality can foster different outcomes depending on the situation. But and musically, if I were to give a thing of advice, I think it's that there are certain, like, for me, a big thing that I struggled with a lot, and I knew a lot of people struggle with a lot in classes and like in like auditioning, stuff like that, is that sometimes you felt that you were supposed to fit a certain mold of a voice archetype. Like if it was like, hey, like everybody is riffing their face off and scrolling to the heavens, or is like, has like this kind of thing or that kind of thing, or this is the style that's in right now. And even if it didn't feel true to you, I knew a lot of people, and I knew myself, to feel a lot of pressure to try to still conform to it. And it just does, like, that just never ends up working out well, because I think the thing that breeds like a strong sense of motivation and like a willingness to have a discipline to practice something is if you love it. And if you don't love this style, or if you don't love this thing that people are expecting you to do, then it just ends up feeling like such dredging work. And then like you get burnt out very quickly, and it just makes you, it can make you miserable so fast. Like you make something that you love doing otherwise all of a sudden not a fun thing, because you're trying to fit into a mold that doesn't feel right to you. And like my big thing of advice is to just follow the things that you love when it comes to it. And like those could be like odder things sometimes, and it might serve you in a really interesting way. Like when we had like a unit in class where we had like a country folk section. Obviously now I'm in Hadestown, so it kind of makes sense why folk might have struck a chord with me. But even like on the countryside, I was like, I kind of kind of vibe with this. I'm surprised. I was surprised with myself. I was like, this is actually kind of cool. And then like working on that like felt really exciting. And then like you never know when something like that might come up, because then all of a sudden, as like we said with Broadway changing and stuff like that, all of a sudden the styles that you might love all of a sudden like are huge mega shows, or like are having their like off-Broadway productions, or like are having like workshops now for all these different things. And then that's like, oh, now is my time and I could do the thing I love, as opposed to me like throwing paint at the wall, just trying to be in Wicked, even though it's just not the show for you. And it is the show for someone. So it's just everybody finds their own thing.
Speaking of that, before I get to my next question about Hadestown, I'm watching the time too, because I know you have to go shortly. But what is your dream show, real quickly, to be in?
Ooh, okay, dream show. Oh, this is a difficult question for me, mainly because I'm not, for whatever reason, not the most imaginative person. Like when it comes to the work, imaginative, but like in terms of dream shows, I'm like, oh, what do I want? What do I want to be in? I definitely don't want to give you an I don't know, but okay, one dream show that I had as a kid and would to be in it would both make me happy for myself and also make me feel like I made like 10-year-old Chibueze proud if I got to be in Lion King and play Simba. That'd be wonderful.
I love
It'd be
that
so
show.
cute. Yeah. And like, you know, I only watched it for the first time very recently, like the stage production. And like I was like, oh wait, I didn't realize how like active and how much like cool physical dance movement type things were in that role, in addition to like obviously the wonderful singing and like the story we all know.
Good.
And I was like, yeah, I would love to be a part of that one day, definitely.
Yeah, it's an insane show. I saw it in October for like the first time since I was a kid, and I was like, oh wow, like I like didn't take this in as a kid, and this like what everyone is doing on the stage is insane. It's crazy.
It's truly wild. And then if I gave another one, maybe I would say, oh, it was just in my head. Oh, okay. Another big musical I would love to be a part of, and in a similar vein to like, because I fell in love with it when it first came out, and to be in it would be amazing. Hamilton, anyone, just put me as anyone, and I'll have a great time. Put me as Eliza if you have to. But like,
hey, well now I'm like, you should do a cover of Burn or something.
Yeah, hey, maybe get their interest peaked.
Hey, I mean, I feel like that would be very interesting. People would love that.
But yeah, those are two big ones for me.
So, how would you convince people to come see Hadestown on tour?
Okay, I think one, if you're a fan of, like, because I know a lot of people in our circle of music theater are happy to see a musical because it's a musical and that's the thing we love so much. And I know a lot of people who sometimes get like off-put in some way or the other for blah reason. But I think the musicianship and the quality of music, especially, you know, written by a singer-songwriter first and foremost, as opposed to like a music theater composer, it's so eclectic, it's so unique, it's so its own thing, that just to experience that, and like, even if you went into it with almost like this concert mindset of like, you know, I'm hearing like this folk blues jazz fusion band and they're all singing, like they all like super talented voices, and like it'll be dance productions too. From that standpoint alone, it's like a great reason to come see the show. But then with the story on top of that, that makes it even more wonderful, because I think it truly is a show that is perfect for like the moment that we've all gone through. And it's a show that emphasizes the rebirth, like for like a Hades and Persephone type of thing, emphasizes like the rebirth of a love, and like how, like, you know, how music can foster both community with like all of the people around, and also can like open yourself up to relationships and to connections that you might have forgotten about, and how like love is such a strong thing that it can give you hope in the darkest of times, and it can push you to do things you never thought you were going to be doing in your life. I love to think about like someone like an Orpheus, like, is just like really a regular guy who likes to play music, and all of a sudden now he's running through like tunnels and like doing something no human has ever done because he loves someone that much. And I think anyone who has ever loved anyone will connect to that. And I think anyone who has gone through like hardships in their life in similar ways to Eurydice has, and who has felt hopeless, can all of a sudden feel like allowed to like shed layers of guardedness, and like feel open and feel just refreshed by experiencing love. And so if you're a fan of love, come see the show. If you're a fan of music, come see the show. And if you love theater, come see the show. Those are my big thing.
If you're a fan of like beautiful staging, come see it too.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, if you are in for like, if you're like a super technical person and you're like, wait, how did they do that? Like, there's gonna be a lot of moments from a staging and from a set standpoint and like set design and lighting design standpoint where you'll just be like, wait, whoa. Yes. There was a lot of really cool things going on here, and like really creative usage of this or that. And
just the whole wait for me number.
Yeah.
On a whole other level. So where can people follow you on social media if they want to keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so my thing that unfortunately, I am a bit of a not super updatey type of person, but when I do update, it usually will be on Instagram at Chibueze7 on Instagram. And then also, like, you go to my website, I often update that, just chibuezeihuoma.com. And yeah, you can follow up with things going on in my life, or fun singing videos I decide to post, or news, all that type of stuff.
Yes. And before I wrap up, I want to ask, is there anything else, because you mentioned music and you mentioned writing your own music, is there anything else you want to promote or talk about real quick?
Well, the music I've written, I have not posted anything yet, or is not all I'll say is that maybe down the pipeline, y'all might see something coming out from me in that vein. So if you're intrigued, if your ears are perked from hearing such a thing, then definitely follow along on Instagram and on my website, and perhaps you shall see.
Yes. And I can't wrap this up before asking, what's your favorite Orpheus song and what's your favorite Worker song? Okay.
Alrighty. Favorite, ooh, that's a hard one.
So
actually, I'll start with, actually, the funny enough, the hard one is the Worker song, because I was like, oh wait, there are a couple of bops. But I think my favorite Worker song is actually, it's one of the chants. It's one that it's let's put them together. Chant 1, chant 2, because we get a baller entrance during Epic 2, and then like it's like the first moment where like the workers are like really like the forefront, and then the different solos that they have in chant 2 is just like, oh wait, ooh, like everybody's so like singing down. It's great. So that's my favorite Worker song, the favorite songs. And then my favorite Orpheus song, I think, actually is Wedding Song.
Oh,
I'm a real big fan of what in every iteration I've ever heard of it, like both on Anais' original concept album, on like Broadway with Reeve and Eva, and on our tour with Nick and Morgan. I just,
it's kind of a jam.
It's so great. It's such a because it's so like it's just like a bop, you know, like you lay back, you put it on, it's like yes sir, exactly. And it also it's just so cute too, the way that it's staged and like all like the magic things that like we get to do as workers and that Orpheus gets to see, and just the earnestness of first love in that way.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned chant because I feel like that's so underrated.
Oh, it is truly underrated. Absolutely.
It's like one of the, I get chills watching it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I'm so glad we could arrange this to make this happen. And I will send the links once it's up on the internet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I found it wild. I was like, oh, this hour really blew by. I probably could have kept sitting and just chatting with you for even longer. Also, I'm glad we're both on the green sweater gang today. That was like, really fun coordination.
Coordination.
Absolutely. But yeah, it was really wonderful chatting with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.